Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me. I am still Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. It is still in the description below. It is still your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any of our platforms. Please reach out to me directly. I am still Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing details. Well, this is our inaugural 1916 Company review of a model launched in 2020 that harks back to the reference 105003. Now that model and this one, both nicknamed the Ed White, as that original pre-moon Speedmaster would have been used on the Gemini 4 mission in 1965 when American astronaut Ed White completed the United States' first spacewalk, extravehicular activity. And this watch, or its predecessor, was there. Now this is a modern timepiece that came out in 2020, but it revives the look, the shape, the size, and the Calibre 321 movement. Technically, this is the Omega Speedmaster Calibre 321, all in stainless steel, 39.7 millimeters. It is 13.9 millimeters thick, and from lug tip to lug tip, 47.9 with a 19 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We will pop open this clasp, which is probably the most overtly modern piece of the watch. This watch feels very much like a 105003 re-edition. Only a few reasons why I wouldn't call it that, and we'll get to those in a moment. You can see on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters circumference, particularly down the barrel, this is smaller than a modern moon watch and by quite a good deal. Also, it has pivoted rather than solid end links, so it projects only as far as the lugs themselves. Now, over the top exaggerates the width of the watch. I've actually got quite a bit of clearance on either side of my wrist, and I'm pulling the bracelet relatively tight. But I could recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. Taking a look at the bracelet, at least, is very true to history in its look. Thin, flat links, a little bit of a taper down from the integrating end link. We have satin centers, we have polished flanks, we have outer faces that are polished. Here we do have a very modern system of fixing removable links in place, screws, and you can see that there are many of them, and the links have a really short cross-section, so it should be super simple to get the right fit. Now, if you don't, there are two pairs of divots drilled inside the clasp, so you can change the anchoring point of the bracelet to fine-tune the pick. If you find that you're in between sizes with the links, you can fine-tune the point of anchoring just by moving that spring bar. Now, externally, we have a vintage Omega logo, but you can see all this is thick gauge steel with trigger releases and a single swing arm, so maybe a little bit of a vintage vibe there, but a very modern clasp. Rolling around to the case, you can see this is not a very modern Speedmaster design. We don't have the lyre-style lugs. We have squared-off lugs. We have a satin-finished case with no beveling. Satin on profile, polished lug hoods, no guard profiles for the crown or pushers. We've got a vintage-style Omega logo on the crown, and this is a sapphire sandwich, so sapphire crystals front and back. We've got a bezel that hangs out rather dramatically over the edge of the case, but now its insert is in ceramic. This is why I don't call this a 105003 re-edition. It's a very modern watch with the ceramic tachymeter insert, the sapphire crystals, the contemporary bracelet construction and clasp assembly, but it does get as close as you ever could to reissuing that old watch. Now, the ceramic bezel is very scratch resistant, and then we have a relatively dramatic domed profile or camber to the sapphire to make it look like a vintage plexiglass. We have a dial that's matte black with sunken sub-registers. You can see that there is luminescence here. Again, we've got that applied Omega logo. It's the vintage Omega logo and the vintage Omega marquee below that. Let's do the lume shot. You can see that all three hands on the center of the dial are lumed, so you can read chronograph seconds. And then we've got the tachymeter scale, which can be used with the chronograph to gauge the speed of an object. So you start the chrono when the object starts a kilometer. You stop it when the object finishes the kilometer. That would mean the object was going 400 kilometers per hour. You can convert that to other units if you please. Now, take note, this is a veteran movement. It does not have hacking. What it does have is everything else. It's a superb movement. Legibility on the dial side is fantastic, but the view from the back is what you're paying for. Let's get a little bit closer to the light source. Now this is the Lemania 2310, doing business as the Omega Calibre 321. Now, to be fair, the original Labauche was developed as a collaboration between Lemania and Omega during the early 1940s, so this is partly Omega's movement too. It's a manual wind with a 55-hour power reserve. It's got a nice slow 18,000 vibration per hour beat rate. 55 hours chugging away at 2.5 hertz. You can see that the balance has a blued overcoil hairspring, so in every position, due to the more centered mass of an overcoil, the watch will keep more even time than if it had an asymmetrically weighted flat hairspring. You can also see, if you look carefully, that there's a little sort of brass rod extending out from the regulator over the balance wheel. That is called a hook guard. That is to prevent the overcoil from getting hung up on the regulator, the silver index, under conditions of extreme shock. It is a 17-jewel movement, and you will appreciate that it features column wheel and lateral clutch, beautifully turned out in each case. The column wheel feel is world class, and these movements are hand assembled and hand adjusted. That is not common at Omega or ETA. Omega and ETA generally use movements that are machine made and machine assembled and machine finished, whereas Omega has a one watchmaker philosophy for the assembly of these movements and watches. And so they have a special studio for the Calibre 321, and that is where this watch and this movement would be assembled. You can see the recentering hammers falling on the heart cams. We've got rose gold gilding on the bridges and plates. All of the chronograph components are made of steel with a brushed finish. We have black polished screws, satination or graining across the bridges. You can see there's a nicely grained and beveled bridge for the escapement below the balance. Attention to detail is superb. And all of this water resistant down to 30 meters. If you love this watch, reach out to me. I am still Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.